Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
You can remove your weirding modules. You don't need them here. Not for us. Welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. I am Joel.
And I'm Ryan.
And we're thrilled to have you back. Hope you all enjoyed our the first installment. This was not planned to be 2 episodes, but when we nerd out hard. And so we're going to continue our discussion of Dune today. And I say we just jump right in and get to it. What do you think, Ryan?
Sounds like a plan.
All right. How about we do a Dune deep dive?
I have to do a deep dive.
Deep dive. Deep dive.
I have to do a deep dive.
Deep dive. Deep dive.
I have to do a deep dive.
Deep dive. Deep dive. Deep dive.
Let us fold some space, shall we? Let's fold our space and head off to the desert planet.
Let's do it. And I kind of, half-heartedly did it in the last show, but this is your official spoiler warning for Dune. We've spoiled some stuff already. It's mostly been backstory and set up in the first act of the film. Mm-hmm. We're heading into the second act. We're going to spoil everybody's fates, every single important thing that happens. Everything about Dune and its offshoots is going to be totally wrecked for you from a plot standpoint in this episode.
Yeah. So if you need to skip this episode, we totally understand. We know that we have
it play in the background. We get credit for that.
We have a whole backlog. We have like almost 100 episodes now. I should probably take a look and find out where we are at. We might be come right up on 100 episodes.
Which may be worth some sort of graphic or song or something.
Right. And and of course a best of clip show. I'm just thinking of
that'll be your project for the
holidays. So that would be brutal. But yeah, we have plenty of back catalog.
That part where we're sitting around the couch together going, remember that time when?
Yes, and then then I just oh, it's so good. All right, so let's talk about folding space. Let's talk about warping space, folding it, traveling while standing still. Let's talk about that.
To this point in the film, even 12-year-old Ryan is pretty much following what's going on. But this folding space thing, I mean, I don't even know what I was looking at. And you still kind of don't. Your first time folding space is weird, man. Orange space slugs seem to they shoot different planets out of their weird cleft mouths, but it's great. There's great miniatures. It's, if you've seen any of Lynch's sort of fantasy stuff, like there's several bits in Eraserhead, sort of models and sound, and this is very reminiscent of that. Recently in his Twin Peaks Showtime series, this sort of thing has made a comeback in that. There was a whole episode that was sort of based around a secret chamber in another dimension, and you just kind of don't know what you're looking at, but you can be captivated by it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
two-dimensional nature of the Spacing Guild navigators does make it look a little weird.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the miniatures, the sets themselves, the effects, the scale of it, you see all the ships taking off from Caladan, you see the size of the ship on the ground, then you see there's a whole string of ships, then you see that one of these huge ships going in this tiny little door on the side of this giant metal cigar case
Yeah.
floating in space. It again, it's all these ideas of the massiveness of it, and the way the effects show that off is neat. The world feels large. It feels like there's a lot going on outside the door of any room that you're in, even though there isn't. The film really achieves this sense of this huge world and huge universe that we're in.
Yeah.
This sequence contributes to that greatly. But it's weird. It's weird. It's a weird concept to even wrap your brain around when you're reading all about it.
Mm-hmm.
When you're trying to visualize what that even is, it's even weirder. So and it might as well be, because any way you tried to show it that where you were like, oh, that's what it means. If we knew how to travel across the universe by just getting high and thinking about the place we want to go, then
it's a little somewhere in time to me. It's that where you're like, if I think and immerse my brain in this other time period,
it is
that go to the other time period.
Somewhere in time cinematically is very simple. It's a guy in a dark room meditating.
Mm-hmm.
This is a giant orange space slug spitting his ideas out of his mouth.
Is it just the mouth? Because I could have, it felt like, oh, he's like, sometimes it comes, or am I just looking at two different space slugs navigators?
I don't know.
Because I thought that there was something shooting out his butt too.
No.
Okay. All right. Then that was just me watching it late at night going, is he shooting it out his butt? Whatever. It's all good.
And is it his mouth? Really? I don't know. We see him talking to the Emperor, but mostly it's just smoke coming out of that thing.
Right.
What we're hearing is a translator talking to the Emperor. We're not really hearing what he's saying.
Mm-hmm.
What he's saying is, so we don't, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wacky, wild stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I personally like the idea of folding. We've talked about warp and warp drive, and I've heard like Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about warping space. That theoretically you could warp space to cut that distance between two, incredible distances. You could cut that distance by warping space, and that's what you're traveling through. So the idea of folding space. So it's like, you fold it up and then the other part goes down and then you're left, you've moved. To me, that I'm like, oh yeah, that's actually, it made me wonder like when the whole idea of warping space.
Folding space is scientifically sound, even though I still don't understand how you could possibly fold it.
Yeah.
Or how it's something you could fold. Just like saying, well, you just fold the ocean, try that.
Yeah.
But scientifically, because you can show it, because there's angles and math and all this great stuff.
So I really did. I'm like, oh yeah, I dig that. That's,
this is a whole new,
tracks,
this is a whole new way of thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. I meant to look up when like that idea of warping space, when was that sort of when was that scientifically, when did that first
who dreamed that
one up?
Where would we
did they ingest spice in order to do it? So maybe that's where spice comes from, is someone ingested
there's a real
something.
Neat moment. We'll talk a little bit about music. This is a good place to do that.
Yeah.
There's a real neat moment where the space cigar just materializes in orbit over this great matte painting of Arrakis of Dune, or this orange globe in space. It's very, very cool. And this music called the Prophecy Theme by Brian and Roger Eno starts playing, and it's kind of the first time we've heard this music. And the music in Dune is really fantastic. De Laurentiis famously used in his prior film, Flash Gordon used Queen's music and had a rock band do the music to Space Fantasy, and they sold the movie wasn't a big hit, but they sold a ton of albums and stuff, and that was the idea, to a tie-in. So band that just won the Grammy at the beginning of 1983, they won best new artist, they won best album in 82, and then in 83 they won best song for Africa, was Toto. And Toto's music it's sort of jazz rock, and it doesn't really suggest that they would be great at making a big scale Star Wars like space opera. But it turns out they're wrong. The thematic, most of the music is not very Toto-ish. You don't really recognize them very much. You got to be a pretty hardcore fan to go, oh yeah, that kind of sounds like them, or that kind of does. David Page, the keyboard player and the guy who sings Africa, his father was a band leader and an orchestra arranger, and he had the exact right idea for this. He met with Lynch. They admired some of the same classical composers, and he's like, yes, yeah, Toto will do it. But it was, and Toto showed up and played in the sessions, but it was really David's project.
Yeah.
As far as that goes, but it's cool music. I mean, the opening theme is great. All the stuff in it is great, but there's some collaborative stuff, and this one Brian Eno tune is really, really important. It's this otherworldly sounding thing. It's very different from the rest of the score, which is, even though it's by a rock band, is pretty traditional, big orchestra, There's no Rumpty-Tum marches in it. So it's not very John Williams-ish, but it's still very sweeping and epic sounding stuff. It does not sound like a rock band did it.
Yeah.
But it's cool. It's cool. So I thought we'd point it out here when we first hear Brian Eno's music.
Again, real quick though. I mean, again, and I don't want to keep bringing up Jodorowsky's idea and the pre-production and everything behind Dune. There's one other point that I'll bring it if we get to an Ask Joel and Ryan. I'll bring up another one, but it is weirdly similar that Toto ended up doing the music. Obviously with Brian Eno, for David Lynch, and Jodorowsky had Pink Floyd all lined up to do his version. It's like there was something about that tie-in with a rock band or that pop rock and that sort of progressive rock.
Pink Floyd is a really excellent choice. I mean, at least they write such mood specific stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that there's a logical leap there, and they were a big, huge band at the time.
Yeah.
Toto was really chosen because they were a big, huge band at the time. That's the only reason. Because De Laurentiis saying it's going to be a rock band or whatever, and somebody deciding it should be Toto is antithetical to what the film should have been.
Right.
So the fact that the music turned out awesome.
It was like, okay, well, if he wants a pop band, who do we get? And you just open Billboard's top 100 and just start at the list.
Right. And it wasn't quite as simple as that.
Right. Yeah.
Like I said, Page went and met with Lynch, and they talked and they hit it off. They had a shared vision, or it couldn't have worked. Because, if they'd have sent Luke, the guitar player, it wouldn't have happened. You know what I mean? That's nothing against him or his virtuosity or the variety with which it's just, they just happened to, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. They had that connection.
It's so, because we would have gotten,
said Ixnay on the Odote, and that's how it would have been.
We would have, I have this idea, and it's going to be Harkonnen,
Yeah, I'm just saying. You know me. I'm as huge a Toto fan as you're likely to find.
Yeah,
but it's not a match that makes any sense on paper. And so the fact that in the movie it does is delightful. It's really wonderful.
Yeah,
Queen singing a bunch of songs to Flash Gordon. Actually, you get it. You're like, yeah, well, that might be fun. That'd be cool.
Yeah. All right. So we folded space. and the House Atreides arrives in
and
on
again, now
Arrakis.
another, them leaving their ship, them entering the palace, the flags flying. There's all these great matte work by Albert Whitlock, and the designs are great. I can't remember who designed the sets, but the production design in this film is another thing that's just fantastic about it. It really does feel real and lived in, and yet otherworldly and still functional.
Mhm.
I super dig it. For that matter, while we're singing the praises, Bob Ringwood's pretty much the all-time best, like, speculative fiction sort of spacey, sort of weird costume designer of all time. His costumes for this are great too.
Yeah, I would
So
agree with that.
from a design aspect, Freddie Francis shot it, and he's a fantastic cinematographer. And just all of those elements come together in each scene, like the widescreen images, composition, design, all of that works wonders. They must have been, just to be on those sets and to look at the drawings and stuff. I mean, it must have been very exciting. Maybe not off the hook crazy, like wow you, like Jodorowsky's stuff did,
Yeah.
but like, these look like places you could be and function, and that's pretty cool.
Well, and the clothes, for the most part, the style of the clothing, I mean, they're accessible. Like I could totally I actually have this thought going, yeah, you know what, even though 8,000 years would have passed, you could see an emperor is going to go, no, you know what, military dress is still military dress.
Right.
And it's like, because that doesn't
If
really
anything,
change.
it's a throwback from the way the military dresses now. They
Sure.
They dress like the military dressed in the 20s. They look
Right.
kind of like World War I soldiers almost.
Yeah, you could, and yet you could sort of see it, like, oh, like the military dress still follows its own line, as opposed to the ladies, the Lady Jessica, on and then what's her face, the daughter, and then
Princess
obviously
Irulan.
Yeah, Irulan. So yeah, I mean, the style of the piece is the visual language of the piece is like a lot of David Lynch's stuff, is really strong. So
That's my favorite stuff in it. There's always something, even if the movie's not connecting with you, it's just too odd for you, or it's just too disjointed for you. It is all those things. The craftsmanship is always top notch. Not all the effects work. Some of them are they just dreamed up stuff that they couldn't quite do right yet. But some of the effects are just stunning and spectacular. We'll get to those here in a minute, I guess. Plot wise, this is a weird part of the movie. They follow the book pretty closely throughout here, but there's a couple of characters who are really important in the middle of Dune, the book, and they all get short shift, and this is where it starts. Most notably, this is a part where we talked about David making compromises when he was writing, and then making compromises when he was editing, and these compromises compounded each other in bad ways in some places. No more so probably than Helen Hunt's character, the Fremen, who's the native people, the housekeeper.
Linda Hunt. Yeah, Linda Hunt.
Linda Hunt, excuse me.
I don't remember. No, yeah, Linda Hunt. Oh,
yeah,
totally.
She was doing Girls Just Want to Have Fun across town.
No, but no, totally, because you see Linda Hunt come on, and you're like, oh man, okay.
She shows up. It feels like she's somebody important.
Oh yeah.
She does nothing, and then she's killed. And I mean, it's just something's missing here. Yep. And you start to realize with that character that there's something missing everywhere. Like there's all this stuff. There's something not
Yep.
here that's making me not connect the dots or not connect with the material.
Yep.
I just believe that her appearance shows you that. And if you see her deleted footage, then you see kind of what it was supposed to be. And if you've read the book, then you see really what it was. And you can just feel how, okay, this is basically what's flawed in this is they chopped this up in a way that wasn't functional anymore. And it's not that they were wrong to do it. They had to cut someplace, and this is as good a place as any, but the character almost shouldn't be here.
Yeah, you can't bring someone who has such a striking stage presence.
She had just
as
won an
Linda Hunt.
Oscar for A Year of Living Dangerously.
Yeah.
She was hot actor to get.
And
everything she does in it is weird and over the top, and she barely does anything, and so it just feels like, wow, that's strange. Somebody sends a little. I talked about floating needles. That wasn't my imagination. That's Herbert's. There's some spy on the grounds who sends one of these, what's called a hunter killer.
Yeah.
Which is basically a flying syringe that stabs you and kills you. It's okay by the rules of Canley, as they say. It's somebody sends that in the room with Paul, and Paul knows he's been trained and he's smart. He knows you got to stand perfectly still and be really patient, and then maybe when it gets close enough to you, you can make your move and save yourself, or just really go super zen and just wait till it goes away.
Right.
Unfortunately, the housekeeper walks into the room to warn him somebody's going to try and kill him, and the thing goes zooming at her, and he grabs it and saves her. And then now there's a Fremen in the palace that has a life debt to the family, and they believe, and they even believe before they really have much contact with House Atreides that this voice from the outer world, their version of the Kwisatz Haderach, the universe's super being that the Bene Gesserits want to bring into being, everybody believes in that in some way, even if they call it something different. The Fremen believe that this thing's going to come, and it's going to this Messiah is going to save them. They're truly the chosen people that are going to be saved. And she believes it might be him. And of course, they really want to believe it. So it doesn't take much convincing or much heroics for them to convince them.
Right.
And this was enough. She starts to think, oh, he's the one. And the mother, it's funny how after years of totalitarian rule, the Atreides come and just do some basically decent stuff.
Yeah.
And the Fremen, who are used to being downtrodden and slaves, essentially want to embrace them in a weird way, because you would think they would want revolution, which they do, but they strangely embrace the kindness that they see in the Atreides, even though Atreides are just as ambitious and just as classist and everything else, as any house in the universe.
Yeah, and it's we get that. We even get that, again, my favorite voiceovers of Max von Sydow, where he's like, he cares more for his people than he does the spice.
Max von Sydow, not quite as bad as Linda Hunt, but Max von Sydow too. What?
Yeah.
Why did you have Max von Sydow do this? And again, the character is important. He really is. The judge of the change, a guy who works for the emperor. He's also an outer worlder, but because he's lived on Arrakis so long, he looks like a Fremen. His eyes glow blue, and he, he just sort of fits in with them. But it's Max von Sydow, and he shows up, and you're like, yay, Max von Sydow, and he seems like he's going to be super important, and then he disappears in a hurry as well. But there's a great scene where he goes, let's go look at some spice mining, see what it's all about.
Let's go take a tour.
Let's go do it. So they, Gurney and Leto, Jurgen Prochnow, Patrick Stewart, Kyle MacLachlan, and Max von Sydow all hop in a little four-seater space. They're called thopters in the book. And the idea is that their wings move like birds.
Oh, yeah.
cinematically.
Oh yeah, and we get that a little bit in the I saw that they're in the trailer for the new Dune. They're
That
a little
there
bit
was
more
always
like
the idea
copter,
that they
yeah.
were all these little hovercrafts were flying birds, basically, or bugs would even be more accurate.
Yeah.
Uh,
Dragonflies, yeah.
yeah, they tried to do that for this version of Dune, but they just thought it looked stupid, so they simplified it.
Mhm.
Star Wars created these land speeders. They just float. We're never told why. We don't care. So they created these things that do that.
Yeah.
And they fly out and they come over this giant, like, I don't know what you want to call it. It's like a big dune buggy looking thing. And it's, you know, it's a well platform and a refinery kind of all in one. And it just sits there and chugs and chugs and chugs and gobbles up spice out of the desert. But eventually what we find out is that any sort of rhythmic vibrations or mechanical sounds cause the giant space worms of Arrakis to come, and they'll come and attack you.
Yeah.
And you know that, so you just work up till the last second, and then your little, they call them carryalls, come and lift you up out of the sand to safety. And with all the spice you have, you unload it, and then you go to some different spot. But these worms, as Max von Sydow's character says, the worms defend the spice sands, and Paul, because he's intrigued by this, asks, well, why? You know, why? I mean, have you ever thought about it? Why? What's the relationship between the worms and the spice? And this, he gets all kind of interested in that. Anyway, worms come. Sure enough, here they come, and the worms.
That worm sign.
The worms look awesome. Maybe I'm wrong in that, but I really think the worm effects created by Carl Rambaldi. This is not an easy creature for actors to interact with, and they do. And for, you know, the way it's used in the movie, and with the technology they had at the time, it's a big credit to Lynch for shooting it in a way that really looks real, for mixing in the sand and the storms and stuff, so that, you know, if you do enough of that, it's why all of our effects are always shot with smoke. There's always a ton of smoke in space.
Yeah.
Even though there isn't. But it helps. It helps these miniatures feel real. And the sand and stuff, like, he just does a wonderful job with them. He shoots them in slow motion whenever he can. When they come up, worm sign in the film, I don't know if this is true in the book, maybe it is. When they come up to the surface, the magnetism in the low-hanging atmosphere zaps them with lightning, so you can kind of see them moving and see the earth moving, and you can see lightning occasionally if they're big enough conductor. It's really neat. And then this thing, you know, it turns out some ships up there in the atmosphere destroyed the carryall for this particular mining operation, and no one's coming to take them away. So the Duke lands his little thopter and has all the spotters, the worm sign spotters, all land and get everybody off this mining operations to get them to safety. And David Lynch actually has a cameo as the guy in charge of operating this, and he says, "Sire, what about all this spice?" And he says, "Damn the spice! You know, get your people out of there," because he's seen the worm and it's terrifying.
Yeah. And
that's when Max gets that great line. And it's you've said it twice now, but I'll say it once more, and I'm still paraphrasing, but it's he cares more about the people than he does for the spice. Against all better judgment, I like this Duke.
Yeah. That's the part I hadn't gotten to yet, but I loved that part. Against my better judgment.
And he's even got the look, like Sido acts it when they marry the two things together.
There's a few of them that do. There's a few moments where the actors know that there's a voiceover, you know, clearly in the script it said, and there's going to be a voiceover here, you know, and so some of them are like, knowing that eventually,
exactly, nodding or looking, reacting. So, and it's neat. It's an exciting sequence. The worm comes up and gobbles this thing whole, swallows it whole.
Yeah,
it's just massive and amazing, and it's pretty cool. They tease that they're these giant worms, and then when you see one, it pays off. That's one.
It absolutely delivers. It absolutely, yeah. I mean,
to me, it's one of the cooler moments in the movie. So
Mhm.
at least from a wow, here it is. They realize this visually, emotionally, everything. Patrick Stewart gets to say, "God's what a monster."
Yeah.
Which is great.
I will say, I mean, here's to talk about the worms sort of in general, you know, going, and we go further on in the film.
Yeah. From here on out, the worms are important.
Yeah,
really
the worms are very important. And I think that because the effects of the worm delivered so well, you know, the visual effects and the models and etc., because they go back, and unfortunately you see the same couple you know, there's a couple clips that get repeated throughout. You know,
Really? I don't think so. Through the extended version, there's a ton of repeated footage, but I
yeah,
didn't
but
think
even
there
in this
was
one,
any.
yeah, even in this one, there's, you know, the thing where you see a worm like diving into the sand. You know, it's kind of come up and it dives back in. You see the same footage, I think, 3 times, and my point being, you know, you you see that, you maybe you note it, maybe you don't. I did, but it to me it says these effects really worked, and they knew that you know, we needed just a little bit more. We need a little bit more, and we didn't shoot enough of these worms, because I'm sure it was expensive and took a lot of time and blah blah blah.
No
But it was
doubt.
like, we got to have more. We got to have more worm, and and yeah. So it you know, it just it because they work. They um it's the best effect in the film.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And
Yeah.
that first appearance of it is really quite
Yeah.
special. And
Yeah.
it makes the less impressive or slightly less awesome other worm stuff work, because you did such a great job establishing what it was
Yeah.
visually and how it functioned. Back at the palace, lots of
Mhm.
weird things are going on. There's lots of sabotage devices found. There's Thufir gets really upset that they're finding the sabotage devices too easily.
Right.
The assassination attempt rattles the family because they got pretty close. But they still are feeling pretty good. I don't know if I'm skipping anything during the palace stuff or not. I really don't think I am. They
No.
cruise through this stuff.
It
It is
yeah.
important that they sent their swordmaster out early, and he's been on Arrakis for a few weeks before the rest of the family.
Mhm.
His job was to make contact with the Fremen to see what they were all about. This is something the Harkonnens never cared about. They were just peasants. They didn't care. Weird desert people who like to eat sand. They just didn't care about them at all.
Yeah.
Duke thought, let find out what kind of people they are. Would they even be our allies? Could we be partners in this?
Mhm.
And he comes back with a rather startling whispered report that he goes, not only are they kind of fierce and amazingly like devout people, but I think even though there's only a few in the cities, he goes, I think they're everywhere out there. I think it's
Yeah,
a secret.
their numbers are
Vast
vast.
numbers,
Yeah.
Richard Jordan says, vast, and he repeats it, whispered, vast. And it is they that are the allies that we seek. That's neat. We don't get Duncan's another character where you set this guy up. He gives this report. Next time we see him, he's getting shot in the head and he's gone.
Mhm.
And it feels like, again, if it's another character in this whole middle section of the movie that feels like he's important, but he really isn't. He could have been anybody. This could have been sent in a Valentine, his message. It's cool that Richard Jordan says it because it carries more weight when he does, but it feels like a wasted character.
Yeah.
And it is. He's just edited in writing and then edited again later. There's a whole section with him and Max von Sydow's character and their escape when this battle starts. because up above here, the time has come when the Harkonnens are coming, the Emperor's terror troops are with them, and worse, Dr. Wellington Huey, the medical physician for the family and for all of House Atreides, is going to betray them. And he has the little diamond on his forehead, which is called Imperial conditioning, which has never been breached before. It's supposed, and of course the character who they make a huge deal out of being like just literally chemically incapable of not being loyal is the one who betrays you. That's almost a little on the nuts for my taste. Even when I was a kid, I was like, it's that guy that they made the big deal out of being super loyal. He's the one that's,
Right. However, if we were to extrapolate and extend it out, he does betray them, but
does he? In his mind,
because he's betraying them, but sort of not as
we'll get to that.
Yeah,
but that's a good point. He's a complex, even though it seems like a silly, you know what I mean?
It is. It speaks to it does, like a lot of things. It speaks to the one of the bigger problems I have with the movie as a whole, which we'll get to after.
Yeah, but yeah, it's a good point. From his perspective, he's able to pull this, and it is a huge betrayal. My Duke, I brought House Atreides down, he says to him. And he really has. He destroys the weirding modules. He sabotages the shields so that the air power can come over the city. He just completely brings them to their knees. When the invasion starts, the Atreides have their own army. They fight as much as they can, but the housekeeper's killed. Duncan in shield combat is killed by these new weapons that the terror troops are using. Paul sees this. The Duke is stunned, and with one of them funky needles that we talked about, he gets
Paul and Lady
Jessica stunned, he gets paralyzed,
captured, and
Lady Jessica gets captured. It's terrible. Thufir gets captured. Gurney is his fate's unknown. We see his last charge with one of the little pugs under his arm, the family dog.
Oh my God, that is yeah.
They have a whole.
And I can't remember what he yells. But he yells some like triumph, or this magnificent yelp of
into the fray. It's for something for Duke Leto.
And for Duke Leto, yes, and while holding the pug.
While holding the family dog under his arm, and the Atreides, what's left of the Atreides army, march presumably to their doom. It's great. It's great old school physical action. There's not, the scale is brought a little bit in closer because there's just only so much that they can do, and they have another big hint. They have another big ground battle they have to deal with later, and they don't want to upstage that at all.
Right.
But these Sardaukar are pretty creepy. They're all drug induced. They're wearing these weird gas masks and stuff. The two, we talked a little bit about Sting's character Fade, who we don't see in this sequence, but we do see his cousin or his little brother. They're the nephews of the Baron. We do see him just like one at a time hurling people to their death off this bridge. He's played by the great Paul L. Williams, who we talked about a little bit when we talked about Alan Parker's Midnight Express. He played the vicious, evil prison guard in that film. He had just played Bluto in Robert Altman's Popeye, and he's a great Beast Raban. For you Dave Bautista fans, Dave Bautista, Beast Raban, coming up. That's neat casting that I'm excited to see. Although, I don't know, Joel, do you think it's okay if we take a slight Dave Bautista sidetrack here?
I think that anytime we can take a Dave Bautista sidetrack.
What's cool about Dave Bautista is how he looks like a big brainless thug, and yet he keeps finding himself in roles where he gets to play so much more than that. That's really fun. He sneaks up on you as an actor in a great way. He's a guy that I admire a lot. And he was fantastic in a rather thoughtful role in Denis Villeneuve's Blade Runner sequel. So it's exciting that he's in his next film and that they're going to collaborate on that character. Maybe they'll make him a little interesting. Also, I just watched a movie called Bushwick, which when I was loading it into my little movie database, I choose files from the databases I like so that it auto populates some of the information, and then I do the rest. And Bushwick stars Dave Bautista and Brittany Snow, but it was really funny. Whoever did the metadata for it in the group that I chose, they had, Dave Bautista as the only cast member and the genre they called Dave Bautista, and the synopsis was Dave Bautista.
That's great.
This is why you came for this movie. Like, whoever filled that out, that was really funny. Thanks.
Are you familiar with the genre Bautista? There you go.
I find that really amusing.
How do you sort your Blu-rays? I sorted by Bautista.
Exactly. He's the genre. It's funny.
Does the movie have Dave Bautista? Yes. Then it goes on this shelf. All other movies go on the other shelf.
So Wellington Yui, he's betrayed his house. They clearly have fallen. He obviously, when he tells the Duke that what he's done, the Duke says, all he can mutter, Jurgen Prochnow, why?
Because it's
we're all thinking the same thing. Why? Well, and he cuts to the chase. He says, I wish to kill a man. Not you, my dear Duke. You were already dead. It's not the first time we've heard this idea either.
Yeah, it's because this again, going back to our last episode, we talked about this was an offer too good to refuse. House Atreides taking over Dune, but in reality, everybody knew that this was a trap. The idea was that more than likely the Duke is going to die. Killed. So.
So that's great. Adobe Illustrator wanted to update while I was doing the podcast.
Oh, that's nice. Thanks, Adobe.
And so he says, I want to kill a man, and this is what's going to happen. The Baron is going to be really happy that he beat you, and he's going to want to hover over you. He floats on these suspension jets because he can't walk around because of his disease. He's so bloated. So he floats, he hovers around, and he says he'll want to gloat over you. When he gets really, really close, I put poison in this little tooth, and he yanks out his tooth and shoves this artificial tooth in his mouth and says, bite down hard on the tooth and a strong exhale, and you'll kill the Baron. It's important that you do this. This is why I'm doing all this, to get my revenge. And Jurgen says, refuse. And he's like, no, you mustn't refuse, because in return, I will spare the lives of your Paul and Jessica.
Yep.
So sure enough, the Baron's in there gloating over the Duke's, really unpleasant sequence. Piter was sort of molesting or inferring that he wanted to molest Lady Jessica. The Harkonnens are just super gross. And the Baron spits in her face. Jessica, that's really gross too.
Yep.
Ugh.
Yep.
They're really bad.
Especially in these COVID times.
But the signet ring that the Duke wears isn't there, and that's the sign of his being conquered. And he's like, "Where's the ring?" And Piter was brought to us as is, my Baron, he says. And he's like, you killed the doctor too soon, you fool, because they stabbed poor Huey in the back. Apparently they kidnapped his wife, tortured her, and murdered her. And that's how they thought they broke him. Yeah. But Joel has a good point. They really didn't. But before we move on, we got to say that Leto, the poison's going to kill him too, but he does his duty when he thinks the Baron is looking over him. he bites down on the tooth. Unfortunately, it's not the Baron. It's Piter that's leaning over him, trying to figure out why he's crying and where the ring might be. And I told you, I teased this too. The Brad Dourif's reaction to getting that poison blown in his face. It's just really a take. There's nothing really to it except it's simple and wonderful, and it's a great demise for an icky character. But unfortunately, they didn't get the Baron with the poison tooth, so all this went badly.
Yep. But Yui, as promised,
Max von Sydow's character is being brought out to the desert to die there. His still suit's been ruptured, so they're putting him in a place where he can't possibly, even a desert fox like him couldn't possibly walk to safety before getting eaten by a worm. And even then he'd probably die of thirst first anyway.
Right.
So all of these heroes and these cool characters, some of whom we just met a few minutes ago, are all getting killed. But Paul and Jessica are being also taken out to the desert for the worms to dispose of the bodies so that nobody ever really knows what happens. That's stupid.
Yeah.
Kill your enemies, bad guys. What's the matter with you?
Kill them first and then throw them out in the desert. Should have taken care of that. Yeah. Yep.
Exactly.
There's no reason to let him, and Yui comes through. He had he had marked all these little things in this. He knew that that's
little
what they were
diamond
do.
signet.
His little diamond signet. He marked it on some still suits. Made sure that those still suits were in there.
That the ring was there.
That the ring was there.
That the plans for the weirding modules were included as a little care package for them. All these little things that if you wanted to hide in the desert for a few years and rebuild House Atreides, you really have all the stuff you need to do it here. Yeah. So he doesn't. I mean, it's really true what Joel's saying. I never really thought of that, but that it does he betray his house? He does, but he doesn't.
Yeah, he doesn't. Well, I mean, if he's there, essentially
the devil's in the
serving,
details.
I mean, does he serve House Atreides or does he serve? Is he there in service of the Empire? And so
either way,
and so
either way, he can justify that loyalty oath in his head to the
because ultimately everything that he does is to kill the Baron, and the Baron, and to do that because of the that he tortured and murdered his wife. So
1,000 deaths are not enough for Huey, says Lady Jessica, and it's hard to. After this whole sequence, it's hard not to.
Well, because she doesn't. And also they don't know about the whole tooth. They didn't know about the tooth plan. All they know is Yui.
It's clear that he left them this stuff. They caused the Thopter going out into the desert to dispose of them to crash. Paul uses the voice for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And he smartly, this first thing he says is remove my mother's gag so that she can use the voice because she's super good at it. He's only just sort of figuring it out.
Yep. He's like I got one shot at this.
Exactly.
Okay.
But he does just enough to do it. If it sounds like Obi-Wan, these are not the droids you're looking for. I mean, it is exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
It is exactly that. So, and which came first? Well, I hate to tell you. It was Dune.
Yep.
But it's cool though. It's very cool. The crash is fun. The crash causes a worm to come. They've got to try and escape to rock, but the worm keeps attacking.
Mm-hmm.
But somewhere in the night, somebody sees what's going on and plants this thing called a thumper, which is they just boom, 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 rhythmic thumping that to lure worms either away or to you, depending on what you want. Well, who would do that? It's a bunch of Fremen hiding out in these rocks.
Yep.
Yeah, and this also, there's this whole introduction to the Fremen and their lifestyle and their beliefs, their ecological plans, their families. In the book and in the film, this was shot, but it was cut. Paul, when he meets this tribe of Fremen, has to duel.
Yep.
One of the Fremen challenges him and he has to duel him. And then when Paul kills him, he has to, like, he's obliged for the rest of his life to take care of his wife and his 2 sons. Which essentially, it doesn't have to be full of passion or anything, but it's essentially a common law marriage that he's committed to forever.
Yeah.
That's just part of their culture. And that's all dropped.
Well, and after he kills the Fremen guy in this duel, he like breaks down and weeps over.
He's never killed anybody.
He's never killed him. He didn't want to kill this guy.
Everyone in the room is trying to talk this jerk. I can't remember his name right now, but they're all trying to talk him out of this. What's the matter with you?
Yeah.
And matter of fact, his chief, Stilgar, who's an important character, played by Everett McGill, really well, actually. He even says, if you kill this guy, I just said, these 2 are under my protection. If you kill them, then I'm next, is basically what he says.
Yeah. And that moment, had we had that duel and had that moment of Paul, having that
his breakdown
stuff, I mean, that would have provided so much needed pathos and just another.
And it just slows down the film here at this point, which something needs to do that. I get why it's cuttable, because it's not that important in the end, but
cuttable, but it could have
that stuff they shot. They cut Duncan Idaho, they cut Shadow Mapes, they cut Liet Kynes, the Judge of the Change, Max von Sydow's character. They cut all this stuff. This they filmed. It's all there. It's finished. They just all you need to do is put some blue eyes on them and stick it back in the movie. Yeah, and it would help.
It would have helped. It would have been a really wonderful moment. But
it would help.
But that being said, he comes in, and because Jessica uses the her weirding ways. That's how
says you're worth 10 times your weight in water if you can do this to the strongest of us.
Yeah.
So these 2 will have sanctuary in my tribe, and they name them. What do you want your name to be? So Paul's got a name. Then he's got a name that he gets to choose.
Yep.
Which is the mouse shadow in the second moon. We call it that one Muad'Dib.
Yep.
And he says, okay, then I want to be known as Paul Muad'Dib. He goes, you are Paul Muad'Dib. You shall be named Usul among us. So he's got 3 names we have to keep track of.
Yep. Yep.
Your given name by the
we
tribe,
get to call
your
you
original
Usul.
name, and your private, what will become your Messiah name.
Yeah.
Just spoiler alert for Dune.
We warned you
at this point in the movie, you probably
we warned you at the top. Yep, we warned you at the top of the episode. We're doing spoilers. So
he also meets the girl of his dreams. Literally, he's been dreaming about this woman played by Sean Young. She's Max von Sydow's character's daughter. Does the movie ever say that?
Nope.
No.
Nope, we did not know that.
You never really find that out. A moment where she explains that to him was cut, probably because why would that connection be there if it ends up not meaning much, which it ends up not meaning much because they just don't spend a lot of time together. Nevertheless, Sean Young looks pretty hot in a still suit in 1984, and he's been dreaming about her. So it is rather comical that there's a voiceover not too far in the future from here where Virginia Madsen comes in and she sort of speeds up time a little for us so we can get to the big ending. And she says, such and such happened, and then this happened, and then that happened. And one of the things in it is Chani, that's Sean Young's character's name. Chani and Paul's love grew. And we're all like, grew? When did they fall in love? You know, I know they're dreaming about her, but what?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, from his perspective, he's in love with her. He's been dreaming about her. She's
way too much of this section of the film is like montage. That's basically what I'm saying. Maybe you're grateful for it by the end, you know, when at 2 hours and 20 minutes, you're like, well, at least we didn't spend the whole time bogged down and learning what the Fremen were planning on doing with the ecology of the planet and all their prophecies and things and all the stuff that you have to learn to be a member of the tribe. And I mean, it's a whole culture that in the book, these two people have to meld with. There's a theme in Herbert's work that is missed by cutting this, that it's the Atreides and their honor and their knowledge of all the high and mighty stuff in the universe mixed with these tribal people hidden within the rocks of this desert, this outlying areas of this desert planet. Their ferocity and their utter faith and belief system that is so strong that maintains them, like those things come together to be a incredible force that ends up being unstoppable, at least for a time.
Yeah.
And whereas on their own they were vulnerable or unable to achieve their goals in some way. And it's the same thing, like I said last episode, with Paul and all of his training with all these different disciplines, how he's able to use all of those and funnel them into this sort of kind of perfect guy to take over the universe.
Yeah.
It's awesome. But we miss really both those points sort of failed to be made in the film, which is too bad. But they're both hard to make. There's a lot of stuff that has to go into landing that.
Mm-hmm.
So the Fremen sections are weird. The Harkonnens win. They do take over Arrakis. The big plan is for the Baron, because he's lost his mentat and they won't give him another one because of his treachery. He poisons poor Thufir, who's still alive.
Oh yeah.
Which is this, I won't go into the details of it. It's this typically like Harkonnen nightmarish sequence where they explain his deal. And Thufir doesn't have any choice if he wants to stay alive. And he doesn't. He wants to die, but he's scared to die. There's an internal monologue we're not privy to in the film. He feels that he's failed his house.
Weird that they decided not to do it in voiceover.
Yeah, he has no loyalty.
Yeah.
It was the only way to do it in the film that they made, and they just left that out. So he doesn't want to live, but he's too scared to die. There's nothing more human than that. I mean, I really do relate to that. And it plays, if you think about it, it plays even without him saying such. But
sure,
he works. I mean, he works for the Harkonnens. He helps them strategize. But he also kind of undermines them a little bit too. And they do a good job of undermining themselves. The Harkonnens' big plan is to send Beast Raban to run Arrakis and to squeeze all the spice you can out of it, show no mercy, kill anybody you want, drive everybody to the ground. And then when they've had enough of that, he's going to send his heir and his older nephew, Fade, Sting's character, in there, and all he has to do is just be kind of okay, efficient, and not completely evil, and he'll seem like a hero. Right. So that's the plan that's going. That's and you get to see Sting was supposed to be completely naked in that, and he was really ticked when he found out he wasn't gonna be. But I don't know how he was. I don't know how he was ever gonna be. I don't know how Sting was gonna come out of this steam bath all oiled up and full frontal nudity, like
right.
That was never going to happen. But apparently that little weird costume, like Ringwood designed that sort of late in the game because they all had change of nerves.
Yep.
Everybody but Sting anyway. Boy, Sting is in good shape in this film. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
You see most of him. You don't get to see his wang, but you get to see just about everything else. Whew.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's this physical specimen, and yet, there's a thing about Sting where he can
these days he's just a cuddly grandpa. So you forget the days when he was this menacing, anything he could do or say anything. He had that sort of persona in life.
and this sort of
now he's like sexual, save the dolphins.
Yeah, but my point being, and this speaks to the whole Harkonnen the homosexuality theme running through the house, Harkonnen. He's Sting. When you look at him, and when you look at him in this movie, he is very much, if you are a woman, even as a man, you can look at him and go, damn, that dude is hot. And that's that's the point, whether you're a straight male, a homosexual male, a woman. Pretty much the only group that would not but I think even a lesbian woman would still go, yep, damn. I appreciate I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate the work that went into that.
Eyes. It's not for everybody.
It's that sort of that sort of all sexual and dangerous thing.
Well, and there's the flip side of it is, this is clearly a guy, and this is, I'm not talking about don't listen to me. I don't keep in very good shape, so I'm not ripping on people who do. But this is a guy, when you see him and you see how he behaves, he is never going to be into anybody as much as he is into himself.
Very much.
He's very much the Baron's heir in that respect. The difference is he's not diseased, he's not huge, he's not floating around because he can't walk. He's fully functional in every way, and looking like a physical specimen. So, and even the Baron, when he comes out of that steam shower, he's all like hot for him. His uncle,
right, which is a nice little touch to add to the
ickiness, but also
ickiness
to
of House
sort of
Harkonnen,
prove what Joel was saying.
Yeah.
Wow. It makes an impression. Pretty much, that's all I'm saying.
The Beast. I mean, everybody in that scene. There's a few other. Is the Beast Raban in that scene as well, or he leave by then? But when
he comes out, this is the scene where he's being told to leave.
Yeah, but everybody is just like,
yeah. A couple great actors. Jack Nance, who's in all of David Lynch's stuff, plays a Harkonnen guard, and Leonard Semino plays the Baron's doctor. So a couple of noted actors playing roles that aren't really in the book, that are just part of this entourage, and help kind of fill it out so that it's, at least the body count is similar to the Atreides.
Yeah,
I suppose. So they're worth mentioning, even though they're sort of unmentionable. They're not really worth mentioning.
And in the point of the movie, Sting's character is singularly focused. He has one thing that he wants to do.
Right.
In
the book, Fade is a very thoughtful, very clever, conniving person. In the movie, he's just a single-minded animal. Truly. And whether he's intelligent or not, it's all focused towards just his desires, his wants.
I will kill Paul Atreides. That is all he wants. That is frankly all he says.
His counterpart in the house of his mortal enemies, he just wants to kill him.
I'm gonna kill him. Which is again another reason
he was bred to marry him, and all he wants to do now is kill him.
Right.
So
and
he gets his shot.
And again, but he does get a shot. But again, if that is something that he clearly has made known, I mean, I'm sure Fade has been like, hey, by the way, Paul Atreides, boom, killing him. So when they capture Paul Atreides, no one goes, hey, remember Fade was talking about
and at first I thought Fade's not there because you don't see him, but you do see him. He does show up along.
Yeah, and it's like, well, where you're we're gonna send him out to the desert to again, that was another moment where I'm like, no, that doesn't track. No, I thought Fade. Okay, all right.
Again, it's all more complicated in the novel. That whole section, there's a lot more happening.
Sure,
they don't escape in quite the same way. They, it's there's a lot more there.
Right.
But
all right. So
part, I understand why they cut that. Let's just get to the house falls.
Yep.
They make their escape, and that whole part in the middle.
Let's get to the
Fremen, with Duncan, with Liet Kynes. Let's just get rid of all of that. It's a shame to make it go, but that cut, I can hardly begrudge them.
Right.
Because cinematically, you've got to move things along someplace.
Mm-hmm. And so Paul and Lady Jessica are hanging out with the Fremen. And
Yeah,
they're not just hanging out with the Fremen. They're thriving with the Fremen.
They truly are. They with the Fremen, they learn the Fremen's ways. They start by doing that, which is smart. If you want to be assimilated into culture, you learn their ways first, and then they are like, and there's some stuff we can teach you too. Along with the Fremen, they build the weirding modules.
Mm-hmm.
They start to train people on it. They do all kinds of stuff. Chani and Paul's love grew. But Paul's plan, he at some point he's allowed to give a speech to the leaders of all the tribes who gather underground, and he basically says the ability to destroy a thing is the ability to control it outright. We are going to bring spice production on Arrakis to a crawl until the Emperor himself will be forced to deal with us. It's a great plan.
Mm-hmm.
It thwarts the Harkonnens. It does get the Emperor's attention. Really, spice production slowing to a crawl is what the most powerful beings in the universe are most frightened of. Mm-hmm. So it's if they can do it, it's going to work. And it turns out they not only can they do it, but Beast Raban's so stupid and single-minded that they can do it with ease. They just start obliterating all spice mining. They come out of the shadows basically with these weirding modules, and they just start blowing stuff up. Along the way, they get reunited with Gurney, who's been hanging out with the smugglers who work in the South Pole. Again, they talk about it much in the movie, but in the book, Gurney's sent off to meet with the smugglers to say, hey, smugglers, wouldn't you rather be like, merchant shippers, instead we can pay you more than probably you're making smuggling. They take the danger away, and we can work out some kind of deal. It's a Duke Leto special, everybody's happy basically. Yeah. So he had some connections there. That was really the only place on Arrakis that he could go to safely. And while they're blowing up some smuggling ships, they come together on the battlefield, as it were, in the dunes, and recognize each other. And Paul says, you do well to match weapons with me, Gurney Halleck, and they hug each other. There's no sign of the dog, though, which is sort of sad.
I'm guessing that dog was a meal.
Hey, now, we don't know that.
I'm just saying, if it were desperate times and the Harkonnens
this is a David Lynch film, not a Terry Gilliam film. There's no animal. There's a lot of decapitated cows and some weird things, but there's no actual animal cruelty on screen. That's not true either. Sorry, scratch that. I was
gonna say.
Depends on what you think of as an animal.
Yep.
Anyway, the dog's fate is left unknown. That's unusual. Usually when you establish a dog, remind an audience about a dog.
Yep.
The dog's fate becomes sort of important, but the rule of threes doesn't function.
See the Hindenburg. Yeah.
For dog, right? For dog lovers.
Yep.
You don't get your way here. It works, but Paul realizes that what he has. Well, a couple things. The Fremen's Reverend Mother dies of extreme old age. She's been waiting for the prophet to come. Yeah. She believes he has, so she withers away and dies quickly. And Lady Jessica, while she's pregnant with Leto's second child, a daughter, like she was supposed to have, takes what's called the water of life and becomes a Reverend Mother. And unfortunately, her unborn child takes this knowledge of all the Reverend Mothers who've gone before her by taking this, all these powers, everything. That the fetus absorbs all that as well. So this baby comes out like a fully thinking Reverend Mother.
The kid grows super, super fast,
but without any of the emotional maturity to cope with any of it.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't see a lot of that in the movie, but that happens as a result of this.
Yep.
Paul also has to take the water of life if he really wants to become the Kwisatz Haderach. That's the missing piece. He has to do that.
Mhm.
And he's been told every man who's ever tried to do it has died horribly, suffering, writhing around in the sand, eyes bleeding, everything awful that you can think of and nightmarish. So he's got to go do this thing. And this is a really neat, again, the more weird and ethereal and poetic a sequence Lynch's has to do, like that stuff, he just,
Yep.
Maybe mainstream audiences don't love it, but I just feel like each of those bits are just, wow. Folding Space was like, I don't know what it was, but it, whatever.
Yeah.
This is similar. Paul takes the water of life. He does bleed out. He cries blood.
Mhm.
All the Reverend Mothers in the universe all get bloody noses and stuff, including Alia, the little newborn girl, his mother. All the worms come from everywhere and they gather around in reverence. They kind of come up quietly out and they just kind of sway back and forth. And Brian Eno's music again is go in, the whole tribe is gathered around, and he has this dream sequence. His dream basically catches up with reality.
Yes.
It's neat. And he is able, because of he's done this, he is able to dream again and literally see the future through his dreams. He's already done that, but it's always been the same dream with this collection of images.
Right.
When he runs out of dream, he decides he needs to take the water of life.
Yep, and he even says, I don't dream beyond this. Yeah. And so which is a great moment.
Like, hey man, you can die if you do this. I've seen people do it. It's horrible.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm dead to everyone unless I become what I have the potential to be.
Yeah, become the Kwisatz
Haderach.
Yeah, which I always call it the Meshach Taylorak.
If nothing else, fans and listeners alike, the Shadrach Meshach.
Meshach Taylorak.
If nothing else, the movie gives you a fighting chance to pronounce the term Kwisatz Haderach. Because without the movie, just reading that on Frank Herbert's page, no prayer. Yep. There's at least 3 or 4 people in the movie that say it the same way, and so you're like, oh, that's how you say it.
Yep. And you're introduced to, I mean, because I've read like the first 2 chapters of Dune. Mm-hmm. And that term, the Kwisatz Haderach, that's in it pretty quickly.
Yeah,
you're like, okay, thank goodness I know how to pronounce this. I just can never remember how it starts, and that's where somehow I came up with Meshach Taylorak.
It's not bad. I like it. I would have known what you were talking about. And that's what's important.
Yeah,
indeed. And shout out to Meshach Taylor. Why not?
Yep, that's true.
So he does it. He inside of him, he converts the poison into something that his system can tolerate. That's what you have to have the power to do. And now he can dream again and tell the future. And that place where the Bene Gesserits can't look, it's literally is the future. That's what they were talking about. They weren't coming out and say that, but now he's learned that's what it is. What sets him apart from even them is that he can tell the future, which comes in really handy in the sequel. I'll explain why later. Or maybe I won't. Maybe I won't spoil it for Joel. Let's just say being able to tell the future comes really handy in ways that you wouldn't even have thought originally. There's a lot of reasons why some guy trying to take over the universe being able to tell the future is useful.
Yep.
That's a neat sequence. Early in the film, Leto, really their only scene or one of a couple scenes that they have together, father and son. He says, and it's just a great bit of Frank Herbert philosophy too that is imbued with Leto, where he's like, we have to embrace the change. I love Caladan and I love the ocean, but without change, something deep inside of us sleeps and seldom awakens. And he says the sleeper must awaken. And Paul hears that kind of in his thoughts throughout the film. And when he transmutes the water of life, he stands up and he just screams, like kind of Shatner style Khan almost, but not quite as bad. It's actually it could be super cheesy, and McLaughlin really sort of nails it.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "Father, the sleeper has awakened." And it's cool. You get, if you're buying into the movie at all, at this point, you either are or you super aren't, probably one way or the other. But if you are, you get legit chills at that. It's really well done bit. And now we're just barreling towards an inevitable ending. That's the most suspenseful thing that happens late in the movie to me, because you don't think he's going to die. You think he'll be all right. But the film sets it up like, this is, wow, this really is everything. This is everything what's happening here. The creation of the universe is super being. Prophecies are funny things, though. I guess we'll get to that at the very end, too.
Sure.
Baron Harkonnen, Thade, the Emperor, they all kind of come together for this gathering for different reasons. And that's where the Fremen are going to strike. There's also a great sequence where he has to learn how to ride a worm.
Oh, yeah. The worm riding. Yep.
I skipped that. That happens before Water of Life. That's so he can lead the tribe officially.
That allows him, that gives him, that essentially gives him, you know, a good promotion in rank.
Yeah.
He's got to be able, and he picked a big one.
Again, it is the prophecy.
Yeah. It's teased through. It's like, we get, you know, I
don't mean to knock the Fremen. Their beliefs and their prophecies are important to them, but you really do get a sense that they're looking for it and they're seeing it wherever they want to see it. I don't think they're naive. I don't think the prophecy, the things they're seeing are fake news or anything. It's not like that, but I can't stress enough that Herbert isn't one to write a prophecy and then have it be this perfect thing that's fulfilled. And the movie big time loses track of that, but we're not quite there yet.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
Because the very last thing that happens, the last moment of the movie, misses the point of the entire story.
Correct.
Even though at the same time, it's really super cool in a vacuum. Like, it's this really neat cinematic thing. It doesn't make any sense scientifically, and philosophically, it flies in the face of the meaning of the movie. So we'll get there. We're almost there.
We're almost there.
All these people come. There's this big battle. They're all riding these giant worms. The Fremen and the Atreides are using atomics, which are strictly forbidden. So they're not above breaking all the rules to get what they want.
Yeah, because where the palace and where the hub is against this giant mountain of, you know, rock, and they're like, nope, we're taking that down.
Yep.
We're getting everybody's going to have easy access.
All the sand is going to come flowing in from the desert. We're going to ride the worms in there, and the worms will take fire. But there's a storm happening. Their air power, because at this point, Paul knows when the storm's going to be the worst, so he knows exactly when to attack. When all the chess pieces of the enemy are all exactly where he wants them, and it's a huge scale thing with big music cue and lots of fun stuff, but it's an entirely one-sided battle. Like, it's an obliteration. There's no real suspense in it.
Everybody's using their weirding modules, so it's like horror and crap.
Alia, Paul's little sister, as a infant, is played by Alicia Witt, who's a really good actor and is a music prodigy too. She's a really good musician.
Yep, she is. That's mostly what she's doing now. She doesn't really
mostly
take
music
work.
Now.
Yeah, she doesn't take acting work unless she really wants.
She makes a really neat appearance at a dinner party in Twin Peaks too, as a teenager, where she comes in and actually plays the piano.
Oh yeah.
So that most people who are in Dune are also in Twin Peaks.
Right.
So even though Dune tanked, like, the people followed David anyway into battle on Blue Velvet and all his further projects. So I always find that kind of interesting. Alicia Witt's just a little kid, although she was a music prodigy when she was 5 or however old she is in this. She's the daughter of famed television producer Paul Junger Witt. So she was a kind of she had an industry inside track, like a lot of little kids do. But kind of amazing actor. She's overdubbed in a sort of, it's not sloppy, but you can't overdub a kid with an adult trying to sound like a kid. It always sounds the same to me, and I can always spot it a
Which
mile
I
away.
wondered, but I wondered if that was an intentional choice, though,
It was the only way to
add,
do it.
well, to add that weird creepiness to this kid is not a kid.
She's creepy.
She's creepy, and Alicia Witt, physically, the stuff she's doing physically, because again, like you said, her voice is overdubbed. The stuff that she's doing physically,
I guess I don't know that for a fact. I just really believe it in my heart. That
well,
her
it's,
voice is
I mean, but well, I mean, I mean, I don't think, I mean, unless she, but it doesn't. It's got to be a overdub. It's got to be.
Well, it's clearly an overdub. Whether I just don't think it's Alicia doing it. Either.
I don't think so either. But physically, physically, what Alicia Wood is doing is gonzo. It's bonkers. She
buys
going for it. Yeah, and it's like
Alia is only with us in this last chapter, but she's a super important part of the story going forward. So again, it's important that they establish it. Yep. Also, she's the one, ironically, who ultimately gets revenge against the Baron.
Yes.
She waits till just the right moment where the atomics sort of sucked out the wall of the part of the palace that he's in, and she pulls his heart plug out and stabs him with the Gom Jabbar. We didn't really go into all this stuff. There's so much stuff in it.
He doesn't have a heart plug. I read this. She pulls the essentially the controls for his.
That's right. She yanks the controls of his suspension thing.
Yeah, so he has no control over where he's flying, but she's poisoned him. And then it's like, bye, go suffer. You know, he's gonna go.
He floats out into the sand and into the belly of a giant worm. Very fitting demise for the floating fat man, the Baron.
Mm-hmm. You're assuming he's going to slowly be digested over 1,000 years.
Also, it's really cool. Yeah. Our Reverend Mother Helen Mohim has come with the Emperor to Arrakis, and she's by his side. And as soon as Alia comes in the room, she just starts freaking out.
Yep. Kill that child. Kill that child.
Helen Mohim is a really important character in the backstory and in Dune. She's played by, and I never said this, she's played by the great Shane Phillips, Irish actor who's just stunningly good performer. And she says, you must kill this abomination immediately. And the Emperor's kind of like, what's your problem?
It's like, dude, what? It's a kid. I think we're good. Yeah.
Wait a minute. I want to hear what the weird kid has to say.
Yeah, we'll get to it. Go ahead,
we'll get to the killing of everybody.
Yeah, well, go ahead, weird kid.
We all agreed.
I was not expecting this. There's no way any of us could have been expecting this, right? Let's hear it out. Let's see how this plays out.
And she also, and all in this one scene, Alicia carries the scene. She also reveals who Muad'Dib is.
Yeah,
and has been all the time. It's Paul Atreides. And Baron, everybody's finding this out for the first time.
Yep.
And they do it all standing there, like the entourage. And then at the bottom of their little altar that they're standing on is Beast Graban's head on a little platter.
Yes.
because the Emperor has made an example of his incompetence. It's fun. I mean, I don't know what to say. It's fun, weird stuff, but it's pretty weird. At the end of the invasion, when the big music cue comes to fruition and everything's happened and all of this justice has been dealt out, not all of it yet, but the big battle ending sequence, there's this picture of Alia just standing kind of in the wind with one of the Fremen's worm tooth knives in her hand and just grinning and smiling. And you can see one little strand, and this is important. You can see one little strand of Alicia Witt's natural bright red hair sticking out from under her little Bene Gesserit nun outfit. Alia has bright red hair. Who else do we know that has bright red hair, Joel?
I believe that would be the Harkonnens.
So I'm not going to spoil that for you, but do some thinking about it.
See, we would, again, if we would have had future movies, had there been sequels as there was hopes, then
we'd have found out more.
We would have found out
more.
Yeah,
there's two big things I won't spoil completely, and that's one of them, although I've given you a big hint. If you think about it, if you think it through, it a really sort of tragic thing in a lot of ways. So all we really got to do is resolve all this now. Denouement City. We got a little bit of action left in us.
Yeah,
it's mostly all this. It's mostly the end of Henry V. The remaining French court and the English people are coming in, and they got to settle everything. What's going to happen from here?
Mm-hmm.
In this sequence, the most notable thing that happens is Paul basically comes in and gives the speech, blah, blah, blah. Listen to me. I'm in charge. Here's what's going to happen. But he's all high-minded about it. His Atreides side is kicking in big time here.
Yeah.
Because that's the language his audience in this room speaks. And one of the Fremen says, and his word will mean death to all those who oppose the righteous. And Sting says, the righteous. Just completely incredulously.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul, without even looking at him, this is great that he doesn't look at him. He says, there's a Harkonnen among you. Give this Harkonnen a blade and let him step forth.
Yep.
Joel and I like that sort of high language, so we're enjoying this very much. And the Emperor says, if Fade wishes, he can meet you with my blade in his hand. And Sting says, I wish it.
Yep.
And Paul says, the Emperor's blade. Just calm as a cucumber.
He's
Fade is the most badass dagger fighter in the known universe. He cheats, he psychs his enemies out, he's got all the moves, all the training, he's cold-blooded. This is setting up to be a pretty spooky thing.
Yes, and they let it, and the only way as a viewer we know all of this is because they allow us one moment of each.
Yes,
one moment of
taunting, we get.
One moment
in
of
the cheating. Book. There's a whole scene where
I'm sure
where Thufir is coaching him to duel with these other people from other planets who all they do is duel for a living, and he's showing them all this stuff. I suppose a dueling arena and all that was just. They couldn't spend the time on that, but it's set up in the book like nobody can beat this guy at dagger fighting.
Yeah,
but Paul beats him with Bene Gesserit and Mentat training going on in his head. In Fade's cool Harkonnen outfit, he's got these poison blades that stick out of the side. So if they even rub up against each other, Paul's doomed. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have to deliver a fatal blow to kill him. And they fight, and Paul makes fun of his girlfriend and just does everything evil and bad that you can think an evil and bad person can do.
Fade makes fun of Paul. He's like, ooh, is that your little pet?
Perhaps.
Perhaps. Should I give her special attention?
I will kill him.
Yeah.
It's fun. Sting is let off the leash.
Yeah, he's literally just like, go. Be crazy.
There is a sad sense of inevitability. Fade is not going to kill Paul here with 10 minutes to go in the movie. So
right.
You just know that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thufir makes this was cut from the film, but Thufir makes a sacrifice here at the end of the film. It's
this Thufir, the Thufir scene I saw. And then the fight happens.
Yeah.
And
it's great. Our buddy Paul bends like a reed in the wind. He outmaneuvers them, and he jams again. These knives that the Fremen use they're wicked looking. They look like bones.
Yep.
They're curved, kind of not quite right, and they're from the teeth of a worm, basically. And he just shoves it up under his chin and into his skull.
Right.
And then he does something else.
Yeah.
He yells at him. And by yelling at him, he splits Fade in half. And the ground beneath him like an earthquake.
Yeah.
And what is Stilgar's buddy leans over to him and says, Paul no longer Muad'Dib, or Usul in this case. He says Usul no longer needs the weirding module.
Yeah.
He can just kill with a word out of his mouth without the help of any of the gear or really a thought. That's a crazy but rather gruesome show of strength at the end of the school.
Well, and again, if there was any doubt of the prophecy that he is, it's like, yep, nope, you really, I can, because he tells the Reverend Mother, he's like, I could kill you with a word, blah blah blah, and then he.
Yep. Look into that place you dare not look. You will see me staring back at you.
Yeah, and so now it's like boom, and poor
and Alia says, "And how can this be?" It's the last line of the movie. I'm going to tell you what the last line of the novel is. It's much cooler, but the last line of the movie is, "For he is the Kwisatz Haderach." And then outside the temple, outside the palace, it starts raining.
Yep.
Never a drop of rain on Arrakis. It starts raining, and all the Fremen are smiling, and they're like, "Oh my God, it's a miracle."
Yep.
The last line of the novel is, it's basically Paul saying, "Hey, Princess Irulan, we're getting married, but I'm never gonna touch you.
I saw they
really even be nice to you."
Yep, this was shot. This was, I mean, I watched this deleted scene too,
right,
where he's just like,
so unlike Henry V, where he spends all this energy wooing the princess, he basically he gets engaged, but he blows off the princess.
Yeah, he's like, we're gonna marry to ensure that an Atreides will become emperor. Mm-hmm. And then he walks over to Chani and he's like, look, you will have my love, blah, blah, blah. She will have my name, and that is all. Everything else, touch her. Yeah, I will never touch her, blah, blah, blah. And the final line of the movie in that way is Jessica leaning over and go something about you'll come.
It's the final line of the book. It's she says something about Princess Irulan in the book.
Yeah.
If they didn't shoot this part, but this is all part of the same. She does lean over to her. Jessica and Chani were not fast friends or anything, but she leans over and she says, I hear the princess has like a literary bent. He goes, blah, blah, blah. Well, that'll come in handy, I guess, blah, blah, for whatever reason. She says, I can tell you this, though. It's we, the concubines, history will call us wives.
That's what it is, yes.
And that's the final line of the book. And it's a cool line coming from her between those two characters.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't rain outside.
No.
Now the rain is cool. I mean, the music is cool. Like it's a WTF moment at the end of a kind of WTF film. So it works great.
Right.
But Herbert was always, and he saw the film actually. He loved it. He does, and he even thought the ending was kind of cool. But he said it sort of misses the point, though. I mean, the point was always that this was a young boy playing at God, not an actual, God figure on this planet. This didn't happen. None of this stuff happened to him because of some miracle. It was all this stuff that converged to make him really, really powerful, but it all had a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And the later books really do, like I said, I was going to tell you how seeing the future really helps him, or really allows him to survive in future books. And I won't say why, but it's that's the point he's trying to make. There's 2 points. One is that we are coming together as people, as different tribes, as different battling houses, as different schools of thought and disciplines of philosophy are merging. Those things is where the magic happens, are combining them. The alchemy of all that is what's so cool about humanity. A melting pot of ideas and races and cultures. It's just to be celebrated.
Yeah.
And there's limitless potential in it. I mean, you can argue the merits of that if you want, one way or the other, but to me that's a super cool idea in like I say, in a vacuum, absent some of the realities of our lives. It's really, really cool. And the other thing is, be careful about believing what people say about you. Even if you are the most powerful person in the universe, there's pitfalls if you come to believe all that about yourself. And the books sort of go on to sort of show that. But they're great books. And this is a pretty cool movie. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff that happens in it. Like we said, maybe what we've described as boring, or maybe it piques your interest. We've left a ton out.
Right. Yes, there is lots of cool. That I think that's what gets me still so excited about having not read the books, about seeing the movie and wanting to read the books, is because the ideas in this science fiction, in this world building, the ideas are really intriguing to me.
Even when they confuse you or you don't know
Even
what
when,
they're talking about.
yeah,
There's this scene, I mean, we could talk about all, but there's this scene where uh, the, uh, Paul's personal guard and the Fremen, that he eventually he has to move up in the ranks of his own personal guard,
mm-hmm.
and build relationships with all these people and train them and be trained by them. And there's this scene in the film where they kind of rub this blood or paint on their hands, this red thing, and they're like, these will be your personal guard. And they and Everett McGill, sorry, holds up his hand to the screen and says, the Fedakeen. And
Yeah.
that's all he says. And the Fedakeen is a thing that you learn all about in the book. In the movie, it just shouldn't be. What do they bother even saying it for? There's no point in saying it when it has no meaning to the audience. And it's never uttered again for the rest of the movie. You know what I mean? So the movie's full of that stuff. And some of it does intrigue, some of it baffles, but
right. And that it is one of, to me, it's stuff like that, though, that is one of the biggest one of the biggest drawbacks, one of the biggest flaws in the movie is it seems to throw in little things like this that, if you are familiar with the books, you can fill in. Like, oh, okay, yeah, oh, that's great. I know what that means, and so I feel like I'm in on this thing. But
it's funny because Dune and then you get back to what you're saying, but Dune didn't let down fans of the book so much. Even though it's such a hollow interpretation of it, the fans of the books were able to fill in all the blanks and follow exactly what was happening the entire time.
Right.
So they really didn't have the same problems that general audiences had when they were watching it.
Right. And the thing is I think because it was executed in that way, you're able to fill in this backstory. Not having any of that information, nothing is earned in this film. There's nothing is there. Paul never has to.
I wouldn't go so far as to say nothing, but it's the whole it's a culmination of a bunch of unearned big moments.
Yeah. I mean, and it's just and
however well you execute those things, and however you balance the tone and stuff, it doesn't really matter if it feels unearned.
Yeah,
Joel's exactly right about that, and that's a super common reaction.
That's why, if we would have had that scene where Paul had to duel the Fremen, the Fremen guy, and kills him, and is really
and get introduced to his new wife and his two children, and just go through that whole process. It's all meaningful stuff.
Yeah, and having that little bit, so that we would have said, okay, so now as Paul moves forward, it means something now because of the because of what he had to do to get that, and he's and it's not just glib. It's not just it's not just no, Paul's in, and suddenly this outsider comes in, and all of a sudden he's just flown through the ranks, and now he's leading our people.
Right. It happens in the blink of an eye in the film. Truly.
Yeah, and with seemingly no resistance, no hardship, everyone buys into Paul. Yep, good, cool. Hey, cool, weird. We're gonna learn to do weird things with our voice with a module. At least
there was the one Fremen who was like, I don't accept this guy. I don't like outsiders coming into my turf. Like, there was at least one guy who represents that idea.
Yep.
Without him, there's nobody who represents that.
Yep. And you don't hear, that one guy, then you're like, okay, cool, noted.
You do see his two sons with their little sort of Jufros training with this guard, which is fun. Those are his two kids, those of you who watch the movie.
Yep.
And the Afros and the ethnicity of the Fremen isn't an accident either. They're considered in the books long, eons descendants of the people of Israel, which is really sort of interesting when you think about it. And the casting that David Lynch does, he doesn't talk about that because, frankly, the book doesn't talk about that. That's a reveal that comes. Mm-hmm. It comes just in a few sentences. Where if you're reading along Frank Herbert's sequels, that's either a stunner, like wow moment for you, or you could read right by it and not think anything of it. It's one of those tricky little things, you know. But the casting plays to that, which I think is kind of neat. I really dig it.
What do we want to say about the extended version and the miniseries?
Well, we talked about a few of the scenes, and the biggest is this duel section, and that where that film slows down at that point. But there's early stuff. There's the later thing with Thufir. There's a lot of deleted stuff. There's House Carino stuff that we could have used. Their opening scenes are longer. There's a lot more housekeeper, and even though those scenes aren't great, at least feels like she's in the movie for a reason.
Yep, and they put all of that back in
a TV edit that is TV terrible.
Edit. Yeah, and
some people swear by it.
Oh, do they really?
Some fans swear by it because there's more stuff in it, and the stuff is great, but it's
because
it's a terrible edit. All the artistry, all the careful editing, and all the special effects are looped and changed, and the music is hacked up. It's just a really, really badly made movie that way.
Yeah. And Lynch takes his name off of it, and it becomes an Alan Smithy film.
It becomes an Alan Smithy film, but my favorite is writer's credit didn't have an Alan Smithy, so because he wrote the screenplay, and could change his name to whatever he wanted. He changed the writing credit on that version of Dune to Judas Booth.
Yep. For two obvious.
Good old Judas Booth.
Yep.
That's such the two great betrayers of all time.
Yeah.
Really. That tells you what he thinks about it.
Yeah. And the miniseries, I don't know anything about the miniseries.
Move on from extended, let's talk about Lynch for just a moment.
Oh, okay.
He's been offered the chance to recut this more than once and to put out his definitive version. He's been given an effects budget to recolor the eyes, to do whatever he needed to fit this stuff together.
Yeah.
And he's refused. I don't know how many times he's been offered, but 2 big times where I know he's been offered the chance to do it. And he's refused both times. And he said, first of all, it's just too painful to go back and relive all that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing that I just don't want to go through that. I consider it such a failure on my part artistically that I don't, even if I could improve it, I don't want to do I just don't want to put myself through it.
Yeah.
And the other reason is, there's more stuff there, and there is, but and it may make the movie better, but it doesn't save the film. The film's inherent problems will all still exist, even if I put all this stuff back in.
Yeah.
And he's probably not wrong about that. And then lastly, there's a fan edit out there that is really extraordinary. Some of the leftover footage isn't good quality, but he's very artfully put the movie back together the way it was originally scripted, with none of the flaws of the terrible TV cut, which you can find officially. It's called the Spice Diver Redux version. And if you're a fan edit type of person, you should seek that out, because it's the best way to watch Dune. It just is. It's better than the theatrical cut in many, many ways. Some ways, everything but the kitchen sink is thrown back in. So some of the movie doesn't need all of that, but it's a 3-hour film, and it feels epic. And he has very artfully done it, preserving music, not looping effects, not changing the voiceovers. He's eliminated a ton of the voiceovers, meaning the narrative ones.
Yeah.
But he has eliminated all but the most wonderful inside your head voiceovers, and the film works better without so many of those. I get what David was thinking, which is, if I'm going to have these, I got to have them.
Right.
So it's got to be a thing. But he could have gotten away with less. Spice Diver sort of proves that. And then the miniseries, again, the miniseries, it doesn't have any of the glory of the visuals or any of that. It's a made for sci-fi film. It's the most expensive made for sci-fi film ever. And it tells the whole story. The first 3 episodes are Dune. The 4th episode of Children of Dune is actually all of Dune Messiah in one 2-hour tight group. And then the last 2 episodes are Children of Dune Part 1 and 2, essentially. It's the whole trilogy. Susan Sarandon, James McAvoy, William Hurt, Ian McNeice. It's populated with fantastic actors playing some of these roles that we really love. And some really interesting, it was shot in Hungary. And it's got all kinds of really cool Eastern European actors in it. It's kind of half and half, which is fun to watch. The Eastern Europeans in this case, like a lot of films shot in Hungary, aren't just in the background in the film. He utilized some of their better actors, and that was cool. The woman who plays Alia in particular, which I've never seen her in anything before or since, and she's fantastic.
Well, cool.
She's an Italian actress, and she's amazing. So Alia as an adult. So the miniseries, you get to watch the whole thing. You really get to slow down and have stuff explained to you, but it shows you that you need 6 some hours to do the first book really properly. Yeah. And then after you've set all that up, you can pick up the pace a little bit, but you got to set it all up properly. The miniseries does a really, really good job of that. It's all written by John Harrison. The first 3 segments too were directed by Harrison. It's technically 2 miniseries, Dune and Children of Dune.
Sure.
It's 3 books. It's not bad. But if I were you at this, normally I would say after you've seen Lynch's film, go ahead and see that, and then it'll fill in a lot of the blanks for you. I would say wait for Denis' film at this point. Because his thing is coming, and
at this point,
and he's the one who has the potential to really knock it out of the park, maybe.
Yeah. At this point, I'm gonna read the books now and in preparation for Denis' movie.
Doesn't hurt to read the books.
Yep.
They won't spoil the movie for you in any way. And if anything, it will greatly enhance the movie for you.
Sure.
Even Denis' movie, which has already been chopped up, the first book has already been chopped up into multiple parts. There's no Baron Harkonnen in the credits. There's no Fade in the credits. There's no Shadow Mapes in the credits. So I don't know how they do it without, or is there a Baron? Maybe there is a Baron.
I think there's a Baron because
there's a Baron and a Beast. There's definitely Beast Raban.
Yep.
But there's no Fade in the credits, which is weird.
My guess is because it's Dave Bautista, they might be combining Fade and Beast.
Oh, interesting.
Just based on literally nothing other than just off the top of my head thinking, you could theoretically combine the two, and he is this, he is this sort of beastly, and maybe that would
make my Dave Bautista sidetrack less of a sidetrack, which I like that about it. That idea
where he can be brutal yet he can also be cunning. So.
That's how Denis has utilized Bautista in the past. Boy, I like that idea a lot.
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, I don't love it because I miss Fade. I miss the duality, but I don't hate it. Let's see what he does.
Let's see what he does. Yeah. And
maybe no housekeeper, no Shadow Mapes. The housekeeper. My friend Noel, when I watched it with him, he literally laughed out loud at that line. He's like, when has a housekeeper ever announced themselves as dramatically as that? It's super melodramatic. He's not wrong about that. Yeah. So do we have any questions that we haven't addressed?
Yeah, no, we really, I don't feel, we've covered so much ground. I really don't want to.
Your last question was a humdinger and it was awesome.
Sure. And I don't have anything as good as that. I mean, I was going to talk about, I was going to ask about Dune's enduring popularity and why,
despite all the versions of it being dramatically flawed in some huge way.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, obviously it goes back to the book being a stone cold sci-fi classic.
Yeah.
It is in the conversation for the best science fiction novel of all time. Yeah, I don't know if it is.
Many people would put it there with a bullet.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely in that conversation.
They would put it there with a weirding module. Yeah.
If it's not number 1, it's not like number 6 either. I mean, it's right
Oh,
up
yeah,
there,
yeah.
no question.
Yeah.
So I mean, that really is it. It's the source material finds a way into your system, even if you don't read it. The ideas sort of work on you in weird ways, even when the film ends up meaning the opposite of what the book means.
Right.
It still introduces these things to you and intrigues. And because it's such an artfully made and well designed and well crafted film from everyone involved, well performed, you know, I mean, I really think that's the only reason why they all put their hearts and souls into it.
Mhm.
It's a colossal failure because it was very expensive and it completely failed to do what it set out to do. So in that way, I agree with David, but in another way, I'm really bummed that he wouldn't take a crack at it, because he didn't need much to put those scenes we talked about back in the movie. And he's right; they wouldn't have saved it, maybe, but at least that film that he shot and his sort of first edit, his first idea of what needed to be included, we could have that stuff. And I do think it would be vastly improved by that. And of course, being the way I am, I'll take Spice Diver's version. And as an alternate viewing method, I even watched the TV version a few times through the years, even though I really hate it because it's so sloppy and awful. I really don't recommend any of you guys watch that unless you watch the theatrical cut and love it and can't bother with a fan edit and just want to see the extra footage. Then watch it. But it is, nobody can swear by it. Judas Booth wrote it.
Yeah.
I mean, truly.
And there's a reason why Judas Booth wrote it.
Yeah, it's that, when the guy who was in charge of the thing thinks that little of it, because David takes responsibility for Dune. He left his name on it. He wasn't going to take his name off. He just, but when he was given the opportunity to, because the TV broadcast like that, it's all a lot looser rules for the unions. I mean, he tells you what he thinks about it. And he doesn't talk about it a lot in interviews or anything, but there's snippets and things out there. You can get his take on it. I wish he'd have put it back together himself, but
sure.
What we have is pretty great. And again, Denis, he was inspired by it in a lot of ways. When you watch the trailer for the new one, haven't seen this one, it's what we talked about it a little bit with his Dark Materials and the Golden Compass. Even the flawed film that didn't work, like the bits that do in the version that can be longer and more fulfilling, like sort of shows you how many dozens and dozens of things the failed version got right and imagined originally for us in this great way.
Yeah.
Peter Jackson, essentially in the tavern scene in Bree, where in Lord of the Rings, where they're drinking and they first meet Viggo Mortensen's character and stuff. The whole sections of that are like exactly like the 1979 Ralph Bakshi animated version. They're shot for shot the same. And Bakshi said, "Hey, that's," and it wasn't just him. A bunch of people were like, "Hey, this is all the same." And Jackson, because he's admitted this, because he was kind of insecure, sort of said, no, that's not, I mean, that's just a coincidence. I mean, it can't be a coincidence. It's almost like that's the storyboard for what he did, it's too close.
Sure.
But he, whatever. So Bakski's like, I don't know. He goes, look, our movie's not great. I mean, it stops halfway through the thing. It moves too quickly through everything, but we were the first people to put that stuff on screen. I mean, we solved some of the problems for you. You can admit that and still, keep your dignity intact or whatever. Yeah. And Jackson heard this. He was like, no, that is right. I mean, it's right. It's sort of like, why fix what isn't broken?
But that's also a great way, it is a great way to look at it. And I think that might be a particularly not important, but a valuable lens when we are looking at the version coming out next year, is that, that Lynch, like you said, Lynch solved some of the problems. Lynch certainly got the worms right, and you can tell from the new
The worms, the still suits. I mean, visually,
they're
there's
pretty
just a lot of
close,
things
yeah.
that are
So there are some things that clearly were, that they,
what's super exciting. Other than this, I'd never thought of the idea that Baron only has one nephew. That is but you look at the casting and it's different. Liette Kynes isn't Max von Sydow. It's a woman.
yeah.
There's all this sort of Shakespearean staged, like playing around with the casting, ethnically, diversity wise, it's off the charts, interesting and cool. It's just really exciting when I look at it,
Yeah.
Whatever, Javier Bardem and Benicio del Toro and Rebecca Ferguson as Lady Jessica. My goodness gracious.
Yeah.
And what's his face as Paul,
Timothy Chalamet.
Yeah, Timothy Chalamet. At the height of his hero powers, this is his project where he's the big hero. We might only get this.
He's going to be the T-Mac Chalamet.
Right. I love Dune, so I want that to be great. I love Denis' other films, so I feel like it can be. I'm very excited for it. So we gotta wait. I still have it on my movie calendar that I'm going to be watching it in a week and a half.
Oh yeah, no. Sadly, no.
In October,
Ugh.
if
Willing
and the creek don't rise.
I'm a believer now that we're gonna be back.
What, you're a believer?
I'm a believer that we're gonna be back in cinemas. I said believer that we're gonna be back. I went, so there was a B word right there. I'm a believer.
Do you care to make a prophecy about when we will return to the cinemas?
Sure. I think we will return to the cinemas around July 4th.
All right. You heard it here first, Fremen.
I think we're going to get a bunch of epic July 4th, releases. That'll be,
fireworks and the whole thing.
Come back to the theaters. Yeah. Come back to the cinemas in mass. We'll see. I hope that's true. I'm going with that. All right. Well, thank you so much. I hope you all enjoyed our deep dive into the wonderful world of Dune.
Like Joel said, sometimes it's fun to nerd out. This is about as fully nerded out these two episodes as we will ever get.
Yep.
Hard to imagine me being more of a nerd than this.
Yeah. And we're pretty big nerds. Yeah. So if you have any thoughts on Dune, of course, on our show, you can reach out. Are you the Meshack Taylorak? If you're the Meshack Taylorak, reach out to us at Ask Joel and Ryan on Twitter and Instagram, askjoelandryan@gmail.com, the movie show with Joel and Ryan page on Facebook. And of course, on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe, comment below. It's all great.
Please, all that stuff.
Everybody, I hope you are staying safe and had a wonderful Thanksgiving. This is coming out after, I think.
The music's playing.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.